Most people don't hate working. They hate feeling trapped. They hate waking up, checking the time, and realizing their entire day is already decided for them. You've felt this. You wake up tired. You go to work, you do what you're supposed to do. You come home, and somehow you're still behind. The money comes in, but it's already gone. Bills, expenses, things you didn't plan for, and at the end of it all, you're right back where you started, waiting for the next paycheck again, and again, and again. And you don't say this out loud, but sometimes you think, is this it? Is this how it's always going to be? Because you're not lazy. You're not careless. You're trying. You're working. You're doing what you were told would work. But something feels off, because no matter how hard you work, your life doesn't really change. And here's the truth most people never realize. The problem is not your job. The problem is that your income depends on you. If you stop working, the money stops. If you get tired, the income slows down. If something happens, everything becomes unstable. That's not freedom. That's dependence. And dependence is what keeps people stuck. Not for a year, for decades, because they're always one paycheck away from starting over. Now, here's the part that changes everything. You don't escape this by quitting your job. That's what most people think, and it's what keeps them stuck even longer. Because quitting without a system doesn't create freedom. It creates pressure, stress, panic. So they go right back to the same cycle. But there's another way, a smarter way. A way that doesn't rely on working more but on building differently. Where your income is not tied to every hour you work. Where you start creating something that can grow even when you're not working. That's what this is about. Not quitting your job. Not chasing hype. Not trying everything. But understanding how to build income systems step by step in a way that actually works. Because once you understand this, you stop feeling trapped, you stop guessing, you stop relying on one paycheck, and you start building something that gives you options, control, and eventually, freedom. Stay with this, because what you're about to understand is the difference between working your whole life and building something that changes it. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The 9 to 5 is not the enemy, dependence is. Let's clear something up first. Your job is not the problem. That might sound strange, because right now it probably feels like it is. The schedule, the pressure, the routine, the feeling that your time is not really yours. It's easy to look at all of that and think, if I could just leave this job, everything would be better. But that's not true, because the real problem is not the job itself, it's what you depend on. And right now, your entire financial life depends on one thing. Your paycheck. If it stops, everything else becomes unstable. Your bills, your lifestyle, your sense of security, everything. That's not freedom, that's dependence, and dependence creates pressure. You've felt this before. Even if you don't say it out loud, you think about trying something new, but you hesitate because you can't afford to fail. You think about leaving your job, but you don't because you still need the income. You think about building something, but you delay because you don't know if it will work, so you stay where you are. Not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. That's what dependence does. It doesn't just control your money. It controls your decisions, your risks, your confidence, your future. Now here's where most people go wrong. They think the solution is just quit. Escape the 9 to 5, go all in. But that approach creates more problems than it solves. Because when you remove your only income source without building another one first, you don't create freedom. You create pressure, stress, urgency, and when you're under pressure, you don't make better decisions. You make faster ones, emotional ones, desperate ones, and that usually leads right back to where you started. Maybe even worse. Now let's make this real. Imagine someone who hates their job. Every day feels draining. They're tired, frustrated, and one day, they decide, I'm done. They quit. At first, it feels good. Relief, freedom, no schedule, no boss. But then reality hits. Bills still exist. Expenses don't stop. And now, there's no income. So what happens? Pressure. Fast decisions. Grabbing anything that pays. Going back into survival mode. And eventually, they're right back in another job. Same cycle. Different place. Because they didn't escape the system. They just stepped out of it without building anything to replace it. That's the mistake. Now here's the shift. You don't escape the 9 to 5 by quitting your job. You escape it by removing dependence, and that happens when you build something else before you need it. That's strategy, not emotion. Strategy because your job can actually help you. If you use it differently, instead of seeing it as a trap, you start seeing it as a resource. It funds your life, but more importantly, it can fund your escape. Now this is where everything changes, because instead of asking, how do I leave my job? You start asking, how do I build something alongside it? That question alone puts you in control. Now let's bring this into something practical. Simple reality check. Before you think about leaving anything, you need clarity. Not motivation, clarity. So ask yourself, how much do I currently earn each month? What are my total monthly expenses? What skills do I already have? How many hours can I realistically use each week to build something? Be honest, because this is your starting point, not where you wish you were, where you actually are, and that matters, because real progress starts from reality, not assumption. Now here's something most people avoid. They don't want to look at their numbers, their income, their expenses, their situation, because it feels uncomfortable, but avoiding it keeps you stuck. Clarity gives you control. And control is the first step toward freedom. Now pause for a moment. If nothing changes, if you keep relying on one income source, where does that lead? Be honest, because that answer is your default future. And if you don't like it, then something needs to change. Not suddenly, not emotionally, strategically. You don't need to quit your job. You need to stop depending on it. That's the difference. And once you understand that, everything starts to shift. Your thinking, your decisions, your direction. Now, if this chapter made something click, if you're starting to realize that the real issue is not your job, but your dependence on it, stay with this, because this is where the shift begins. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you start building your way out, not guessing your way out. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. Do you feel like you're depending too much on one income source? Because that awareness is where your exit actually begins. Now we go deeper. Because once you understand dependence, you need to understand the system keeping you in it. Trading time for money. Chapter 2. Why trading time for money keeps you stuck. This is the system you've been living in, even if you've never thought about it this way. You work, you get paid, you stop working, the money stops. Simple, predictable, and at first it feels secure, because you know exactly what you'll earn. You know when it's coming. You know what to expect. But over time, that same system becomes the thing that limits you, because no matter how hard you work, you're still trading time for money, and time is limited. You only have so many hours in a day. So there's a ceiling, a limit, a point where you simply cannot do more. That's the trap. Not the job itself, but the structure behind it. You felt this without realizing it. You work more hours, but you feel more tired. You try to earn more, but it takes more effort. You push harder, but it doesn't really change your situation, because the system hasn't changed. You're still exchanging time for income. Now here's something most people don't notice. You're not just trading time, you're trading your energy, your flexibility, your freedom, your options. Every time you say yes to more work, you're giving up something else. Time with family, time to think, time to build something new. And over time, that cost adds up, quietly, until one day you feel stuck, not because you didn't try, but because the system you're in was never designed to create freedom. Now let's go deeper. There are two types of income: active income and system income. Active income is what you're used to. You work, you get paid. You stop, it stops. System income works differently. You build something once, improve it over time, and it continues to produce results. Not perfectly, not instantly, but repeatedly. That's the difference. Now let's make this real. Imagine someone who works hourly. Every extra dollar requires more time. Now compare that to someone who creates a simple digital product, an ebook, a guide, a small course. They create it once, then improve it. And every time someone buys it, they earn. Not because they worked that moment, but because they built something earlier. That's a system. Now here's where most people get stuck. They think, I need something big. I need something perfect. I need everything figured out first. So they never start. Or they keep switching ideas, or they overthink everything. And because of that, they stay in the same cycle. Working, earning, starting over. Working, earning, starting over. That's the loop. Now here's the shift. You don't need something big. You need something repeatable. Something that solves a problem, can be delivered more than once, doesn't require you every single time. That's it. Simple, but powerful. Now let's break this down even further. A freelancer still trades time. They get paid per project. More work equals more income, but still limited. Now take that same freelancer and turn their service into a package, a system, templates, processes, clear pricing. Now it becomes repeatable, more efficient, less dependent on time. That's the beginning of a system. Not perfect, but better. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If your income depends on you showing up every time, you're still in the same system, just at a different level. That's why some people earn more, but still feel stuck, because their structure hasn't changed, only their income has. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, if I stop working today, how long does my income continue? Be real, because that answer tells you everything. Not about your effort, but about your system. Now let's make this practical. Simple shift. Think in repeatability instead of asking, how can I earn more? Ask, how can I earn again from the same effort? That question changes everything, because now you're not just working, you're building. Now another step. Look at your current skills. What do you know? What do you do? What problems can you solve? Then ask, can this be turned into something repeatable? A guide, a service package, a template, a small product, something simple, because that's how systems begin. Not complex, simple. Now here's the truth. You don't escape the 9 to 5 overnight. You don't suddenly stop trading time. You transition from fully active income to partially system-based income to more controlled income. That's the path, and it starts here, with understanding the system you're in, and choosing to build something different. Now if this chapter made something clear, if you're starting to realize why working harder hasn't changed your situation, stay with this, because this is where your thinking starts to shift. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you start building something that works beyond your time. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. Do you feel like your income depends completely on your time? Because that awareness is the first step out. Now we go deeper. Because once you understand this, you need to understand the one thing that changes everything. Leverage. Chapter 3. What rich people understand about leverage. This is the concept that changes everything.
Not effort, not motivation. Leverage. Because once you understand leverage, you stop trying to do everything yourself, and you start thinking differently. You've probably heard the word before,
But it's usually explained in a complicated way. So let's simplify it. Leverage is this. Doing something once and getting results more than once. That's it. Simple. But powerful. Now compare that to how most people work. You do something once, you get paid once, then you start over. Again and again. That's no leverage. That's repetition. Now here's the shift. With leverage, your effort doesn't disappear after you use it. It continues to work for you. In different ways, over time. Now let's make this real. Imagine you're explaining something to someone. You teach it once, they understand. Great. Now next week, someone else asks the same thing. So you explain it again, and again, and again. That's time-based. Now imagine this instead. You record that explanation once. Turn it into a video, or a guide, or a simple course. Now every time someone needs that help, they go to that resource, and you don't have to repeat yourself. That's leverage. Same knowledge, different outcome. Now here's the part most people miss. Leverage feels uncomfortable at first, because you don't see immediate results. You're building something that takes time. You're not getting paid right away. And that's why most people quit early. They go back to what feels familiar. Working, earning, repeating because it feels productive. But leverage requires patience. It requires thinking beyond today. And that's what separates people. Not intelligence, not talent, but willingness to build something before it pays off. Now let's go deeper. There are different types of leverage, and you're probably already using some without realizing it. One, knowledge leverage. What you know can be turned into something that helps others. A guide, a system, a method, something repeatable. Instead of explaining things one-on-one forever, you package it. That's leverage. 2. Content leverage. Content works while you're not. A video, a post, a podcast. Something people can find, even when you're not there. And every time someone sees it, that's exposure, opportunity, potential income, without you being present.
3. Automation leverage. Instead of doing everything manually, you set up processes.
Systems that handle things for you. Emails, onboarding, delivery, so your time is not required every step. 4. System leverage. This is where everything connects. You build something that works together. Traffic, trust, offer, delivery, and it runs with less effort over time. Not zero effort, but less. Now here's something important. Leverage is not about doing nothing. It's about doing something once and benefiting from it multiple times. That's the difference. Now let's bring this into a real-life scenario. Someone teaches the same lesson every week, same explanation, same process, same time spent. Another person takes that lesson, records it, structures it, and turns it into a simple product. Now instead of repeating themselves, they've built something, and every time someone buys it, they earn. That's leverage in action. Now pause for a moment. Think about your own life. What do you repeat often? What do people ask you for help with? What do you already know that others don't? Because that's where your first leverage opportunity is. Not somewhere far away. Right where you are. Now let's make this practical. Simple shift. Turn repetition into systems. Ask yourself, what am I doing repeatedly that could be done once and reused? Be honest, because there's always something. A task, a skill, a process. Now the next step, how can I package this? Not perfectly, simply a document, a video, a template, something usable, because that's how leverage begins. Not complex, simple. Now here's the truth. If you keep doing everything manually, you stay limited. But if you start building leverage, your effort starts multiplying, slowly at first, then noticeably, then powerfully. And that's when things change. Not because you worked more, but because your work started working for you. That's the shift. Now, if this chapter made something click, if you're starting to see how your time has been limiting your growth, stay with this, because this is where your thinking changes permanently. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you start building smarter, not just working harder. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. What's one thing you repeat often that you could turn into something reusable? Because that awareness is where leverage begins. Now we go deeper, because understanding leverage is not enough. You need to know where to apply it. Chapter 4. The 4 income systems anyone can start building. This is where everything becomes real. Because understanding leverage is not enough. You need to know where to apply it. And this is where most people get stuck. They learn the idea, but they don't know what to do next. So they overthink research, watch more content, delay starting, and nothing changes. So, let's simplify this. There are many ways to build income systems, but you don't need all of them. You need one, just one. Because trying everything is how people stay stuck. They start something, get distracted, switch to something else, and repeat that cycle for years. No progress, just motion. So here's the rule. Choose one system, build it, improve it, then expand later. Not before. Now let's break down the 4 systems you can start with. Simple, practical, real. 1. Skill-based income system. This is where most people should start, because you already have something valuable, a skill, something you know how to do. Writing, design, editing, coaching, organizing, managing, problem-solving, something. Now here's where people get it wrong. They offer the skill, but they don't build a system. So they stay stuck doing random jobs, underpriced work, inconsistent income. That's not a system. That's survival. Now here's the shift. You take that skill and structure it. You package it. You make it repeatable. For example, instead of saying, I do social media, you say, I help small businesses create consistent content that attracts customers. Now it's clear, focused, valuable. Then you create a process, a pricing structure, a simple workflow templates. Now, instead of starting from zero every time, you have a system. That's the difference. 2. Content-based income system. This is where leverage becomes visible. You create content and it works for you over time. Videos, posts, audio, something people can find without you being there. And at first, it feels slow. No instant results. No immediate income, and this is where most people quit. But here's what they don't see. Content compounds. One piece becomes 10, 10 becomes 50, and over time, people start finding you. Trust builds, attention grows, and attention creates opportunity. Then you connect it to affiliate offers, digital products, services, ads, email lists. Now your content becomes a system. Not just something you post, but something that works. 3. Digital product system. This is one of the simplest systems, but also one of the most misunderstood. People think it has to be complicated. It doesn't. A digital product is simply something you create once and sell more than once. An ebook, an audiobook, a template, a guide, a simple course, something useful, something that solves a problem. Now, here's the key. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be helpful, because you improve it over time, based on feedback, based on use, based on real people. And that's how it becomes valuable. Not from perfection, from iteration. 4. Investment-based ed system. This is different, because here, you're using money to create more money, not time, not effort, capital. Examples: index funds, dividend stocks, real estate business, reinvestment. Now this is important. This is not about quick wins. This is about long-term growth. Slow, steady, compounding. And it usually comes after you've built income from other systems because you need something to invest. So think of this as a second stage system, not your starting point. Now here's the mistake most people make. They try to do all of these at once. A little content, a little freelancing, a little investing, a little of everything. And because of that, nothing grows. Because focus creates progress. Now pause for a moment. Look at your situation, your skills, your time, your resources. Ask yourself, which one of these makes the most sense for me right now? Not the easiest, not the most exciting, the most realistic, because that's where you start. Now let's make this practical. Simple shift. Choose one path. Pick one system, just one, and commit to it for the next 30 to 90 days. No switching. No chasing something else. Build, improve, learn, because progress comes from depth, not constant change. Now here's the truth. You don't need multiple income streams to start. You need one system that works. And once it works, you expand. That's how real growth happens. Not fast, but real. And if this chapter made something clear, if you've been trying too many things, or not knowing where to start, stay with this, because this is where direction begins. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you stop guessing and start building something real. And if this hits you, share it in the comments. Which system do you feel drawn to right now? Because that decision is where your progress starts. Now we go deeper, because even when people choose a system, they still fall into a trap. The side hustle trap. Chapter 5. The side hustle trap. This is where a lot of people get misled. Because they start doing something, they feel productive, they feel like they're making progress. But in reality, they're building another job, not a system, another job, and they don't realize it until they're burned out. You've seen this. Maybe you've experienced it. You start a side hustle, something small, something that earns a little extra. And at first, it feels exciting. More money, more control, more possibility. But over time, it starts to feel familiar. More work, more hours, more pressure. Because every dollar you earn still depends on your time. That's the trap. Not all side hustles create freedom. Some just create more work. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If your side hustle requires you every single time to make money, then you haven't escaped anything. You've just added more responsibility after your job, on your nights, on your weekends. And that's why so many people quit. Not because they're lazy, but because they're exhausted, working all day, then working again at night with no clear path forward. That's not sustainable. Now let's make this real. Someone starts driving for extra income. It works. They make money, but every dollar requires time. They stop driving. The income stops. Now compare that to someone else. They start with a skill, turn it into a simple service, then into a package, then into something repeatable, then into a product. Over time, their effort becomes lighter, more structured, more scalable. That's the difference. One is working more, the other is building something. Now here's where most people go wrong. They don't ask the right question. They ask, how can I make extra money? Instead of, can this become a system? That one question changes everything, because it forces you to think beyond today, beyond quick cash, beyond temporary solutions. Now let's go deeper. Here are the signs you're in the side hustle trap. You're always starting from zero. You're constantly chasing new work. Your income depends on your availability. You feel busy but not progressing. You're tired but not building anything lasting. If that feels familiar, you're not building a system yet. You're maintaining a cycle. Now here's the shift. You don't need to stop your side hustle. You need to transform it from random effort to structured system, from time-based income to repeatable income. Now let's make this practical. Simple shift. Apply the can this scale filter. Before you commit to anything, ask, can this become repeatable? Can this become easier over time? Can this work without me every single time? If the answer is no, then it may be income. But it's not a system. Now another step. Look at what you're already doing. Your side hustle, your work, your extra income efforts. Ask yourself, how can I make this more structured? Can you create a process, use templates, package your offer, reduce repetition? Because that's how systems are built. Not by starting over, but by improving what already exists. Now here's something important. The goal is not to work more, it's to work smarter, to build something that becomes easier over time, not heavier. Because if your income keeps getting heavier, you'll eventually stop. But if it gets lighter, you'll keep going. And that's how real progress happens. Now pause for a moment. Look at what you're doing right now. Your work, your side hustle, your efforts. Ask yourself honestly, am I building something or just working more? Because that answer determines your future. Now here's the truth. You don't escape the 9 to 5 by adding more work. You escape it by building something that grows beyond your time. And that requires thinking differently, not just acting differently. And if this chapter made something clear, if you're starting to realize that your side hustle might not actually be leading to freedom, stay with this, because this is where things begin to shift. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you start building smarter, not just working harder. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. Do you feel like your side hustle is becoming another job? Because that awareness is the first step to changing it. Now we go deeper, because once you avoid this trap, you need to understand the right way forward. Build before you quit. Chapter 6. Build before you quit. This is where most people get it wrong, not because they're not trying, but because they move too fast in the wrong direction. They feel stuck, frustrated, tired of the routine, and they think, I just need to get out.
So they plan to quit, or they fantasize about quitting, or they tell themselves, once I leave, I'll figure it out.
But that's not a plan. That's pressure waiting to happen, and pressure doesn't create freedom. It creates bad decisions. Now let's be clear. You can leave your job one day, but not like that. Not emotionally, not impulsively, not without something in place, because quitting is not the goal. Control is the goal, and control comes from having options, not just one source of income. Now here's the shift. You don't escape first, then build. You build first, then escape. That's the difference between stress and strategy. Now let's make this real. Someone feels stuck in their job. Every day feels the same. They want out, so they quit. No system, no backup, no structure. At first it feels freeing, no schedule, no pressure from a boss. But very quickly, a different pressure appears. Money, bills, time running out. And now, instead of building calmly, they're rushing, trying to make anything work, taking whatever pays, and eventually they're right back in the same system, because they left too early. Now compare that to someone else. Same situation, same frustration, but different thinking. They keep their job, not because they love it, but because they understand it. It's funding their life, and more importantly, it's funding their exit. So instead of quitting, they start building. Slowly, after work, on weekends, not perfectly but consistently. They choose one system, they work on it, they improve it, they learn, they adjust. Months go by and something starts to happen. It begins to work. Small results at first, then more, until one day they have options, real options. And now, leaving the job is not a risk, it's a decision. That's the difference. Not luck, not timing, strategy. Now here's something important. Your job is not just income, it's stability, and stability gives you space to build properly, without panic, without rushing, without desperation. So instead of seeing your job as a trap, you start seeing it as a tool, a resource, something that supports your transition. Now let's make this practical. Simple shift. Create your exit plan, not in your head, on paper, clear, specific. Start with this. What are your monthly expenses? Be honest, not rough estimates, real numbers. Now ask, how much do I need to cover this comfortably? That's your baseline, your freedom number. Now next step, how much income am I currently building outside my job? Even if it's small, track it, because growth starts with awareness. Now the key question, what level of side income would make me feel stable enough to reduce dependence? Not quit immediately, reduce dependence. Because this is a transition, not a jump. Now add one more layer. Emergency buffer. savings, something that protects you, because unexpected things happen and preparation reduces risk. Now here's the strategy. Keep your job, build one system, track your progress, grow your side income, strengthen your position, then decide. Not before. That's how you move with control. Now pause for a moment, ask yourself honestly, am I trying to escape or am I building my way out? Because those are not the same. One is emotional, the other is strategic, and only one leads to real freedom. Now here's the truth. You don't need to rush. You need to build. Because once your system works, even a little, everything changes. Your confidence, your options, your decisions, and eventually, your life. And if this chapter made something clear, if you've been thinking about quitting without building something first, stay with this, because this is where your path becomes real. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you start moving with strategy, not frustration. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. Are you trying to escape your job or build your way out? Because that answer changes everything. Now we go deeper, because once you start building, you need to understand how to turn what you know into something people will actually pay for. Chapter 7. Turn skills into offers people actually pay for. This is where most people get stuck, not because they don't have skills, but because they don't know how to turn those skills into something valuable, something clear, something people will actually pay for. So they stay vague. I do design, I do writing, I help people. And because it's vague, it doesn't sell, not because it's bad, but because it's unclear. Now here's the shift. People don't pay for skills, they pay for outcomes. They don't care what you do, they care what it does for them. That's the difference. Now let's make this real. Imagine two people. One says, I'm a graphic designer. The other says, I help small businesses create clean social media content that attracts more customers. Same skill, different outcome. Which one feels more valuable? Which one feels more clear? Which one feels easier to say yes to? That's the shift from skill to solution. Now here's where most people go wrong. They focus on what they do instead of what they solve. And because of that, they struggle to get attention. They struggle to get clients. They struggle to get paid properly. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack clarity. Now let's go deeper. A strong offer has three parts. Who you help, what result you create, what problem you remove. That's it. Simple, but powerful. Now let's break it down. Instead of saying, I do social media management, you say, I help busy business owners stay consistent online without having to think about what to post. Now it's clear, specific, relatable, and valuable. Now here's the framework you can use. I help person achieve result without pain problem. That's your starting point. Not perfect, but clear. Now let's make this practical. Simple shift. Build your first offer, take your skill, whatever it is, then ask, who actually needs this? Be specific. Not everyone, because if it's for everyone, it connects with no one. Now next question. What result do they want? Not what you do, what they want. More customers, more time, less stress, better results. Now the final question. What problem are they trying to avoid? Confusion, overwhelm, wasted time, bad results. Now combine those three. That's your offer. Now here's something important. Your first offer will not be perfect, and that's okay, because clarity comes from action, not thinking. You refine it as you go, based on real feedback, real people, real results. Now let's go deeper. Most people underprice themselves, not because their skill is low, but because their offer is unclear. When something is vague, it feels less valuable. So people charge less. And that creates another problem. More work, less reward, more frustration. That's the cycle. Now here's the shift. When your offer is clear, value increases, confidence increases, pricing improves, and your work becomes more focused. Now pause for a moment. Think about what you currently do, or what you're trying to do. Ask yourself, is this clear to someone who doesn't know me, or is it vague? Because clarity creates opportunity. Now here's the truth. You don't need more skills to start. You need to communicate your value better. Because once people understand what you do and how it helps them, everything changes. Now one more step. Write 3 versions of your offer. Not 1, 3. Test them. Say them out loud. Adjust them. Because this is not about getting it perfect. It's about getting it clear. Now here's the deeper truth. Your skill is the foundation, but your offer is what turns it into income. And once you get that right, you move from trying to get work to creating opportunities. That's the shift. And if this chapter made something click, if you're starting to see why your skills haven't translated into income the way you expected, stay with this, because this is where things start becoming real. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you start turning what you know into something that actually pays. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. What skill do you have that you haven't turned into a clear offer yet? Because that awareness is where your system begins. Now we go deeper, because once you have an offer, you need a way to turn it into consistent income, not random sales, a system. Chapter 8. Build your first simple income system. This is where everything connects, because now you have a skill, you have an offer, but without a system, your income stays inconsistent, random, unpredictable, and that's exhausting. 1 week you have work, the next, nothing. So you go back to searching, posting, hoping, repeating the cycle. That's not a system, that's survival. Now here's the shift. You don't need something complex, you need something simple that works consistently. A flow, a structure, a path that turns, attention, trust, income. That's your first system. Now let's break it down, not complicated, just clear. Step 1. Attention. People need to know you exist. That's it. If no one sees you, no one buys from you. So you create visibility, simple content, sharing what you know, helping, explaining, not trying to be perfect, just being useful, because attention starts with value. Now here's where most people get stuck. They wait to feel ready. They wait to be perfect. They overthink, and because of that, they stay invisible. Now here's the truth. You don't need to be the best. You need to be visible, because invisible people don't get opportunities. Step 2. Trust. Attention alone is not enough. People need to trust you. They need to feel. You understand this. You can help me. You're real. And trust is built through consistency, showing up, sharing, helping. Over time, not once, not randomly, consistently. Now here's where most people fail. They post once, twice, maybe for a week, then stop, and they say it didn't work, but trust doesn't build that way. Trust builds through repetition, familiarity, presence. Step 3. Offer. Now that people see you and trust you, you give them a way to move forward. Your offer clear, simple, direct, not complicated, not hidden, because if people don't know how to work with you, they won't. Now this is important. You don't need a perfect website. You don't need a complex funnel. You need clarity. A simple message. This is what I do. This is who it's for. This is how to get started. That's enough. Step 4. Delivery. Now you deliver. You do the work. You help. You solve the problem. And this is where most people stop thinking. But this is where systems are built. Because instead of doing everything from scratch, you start structuring it. Processes, templates, steps. So each time it becomes easier, faster, more consistent. That's how your system starts forming. Step 5. Repeatability. This is the most important part. Can this happen again without starting from zero? Because if every sale feels like starting over, you don't have a system yet. You have effort. Now here's the shift. You refine, you improve, you remove friction, you make it smoother until it becomes predictable, not perfect, but repeatable. And repeatable creates stability. Now let's bring this together. Your first system looks like this. People find you, they trust you, they understand your offer, they take action, you deliver, you improve. That's it. Simple, but powerful. Now here's where most people overcomplicate it. They think they need funnels, ads, automation tools, platforms. Not yet. Those come later. Right now, you need a working loop. Something real. Something that proves this works. Now let's make this practical. Simple shift. Build your first loop. Don't try to build everything. Build one loop. Attention, trust, offer, delivery. Start small. One platform. One message, one offer, one process. Because simplicity creates action, and action creates results. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, do I have a system, or am I just trying to make things happen? Because that answer changes everything. Now here's the truth. You don't need more information. You need structure. Because once you have structure, your effort starts working. Not just once, but repeatedly. And that's when things start to feel different. Less random. More controlled, more real. And if this chapter made something click, If you're starting to see how to connect everything you've learned so far, stay with this, because this is where things start to become consistent. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you stop guessing and start building something that actually works. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. Do you feel like you've been missing structure or just trying to figure things out as you go? Because that awareness is where your system begins. Now we go deeper. Because even with a system, there's one thing that will determine whether you succeed or quit. Consistency. Chapter 9. Why consistency fails most people. This is where everything breaks. Not at the beginning. Not when you start, but after, when the excitement fades, when the results are slow, when nothing seems to be happening. That's when most people stop. Not because it doesn't work, but because they don't continue. You felt this. You start something new, you're motivated, focused, you put in effort. For a few days, maybe a few weeks, then something shifts, you get tired, busy, distracted, or discouraged. Because the results are not immediate, so you slow down. Then you stop. And eventually, you tell yourself, it didn't work, but here's the truth. You didn't give it enough time to work. Now let's go deeper. Consistency is not just about showing up. It's about continuing when it feels like nothing is happening, and that's the hardest part. Because your mind wants feedback, it wants proof, it wants results, now. But systems don't work like that. They build quietly, in the background, without immediate validation. And that creates doubt. You start thinking, am I doing the right thing? Is this even working? Should I try something else? And that's where most people break. Not because they chose the wrong system, but because they didn't stay long enough to see it work. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Consistency fails when it depends on motivation. Because motivation is temporary, it comes and goes, based on how you feel, based on your energy, based on your results. So if your progress depends on feeling motivated, you will always be inconsistent. That's the cycle. Now here's the shift. You don't rely on motivation, you build structure, because structure continues, even when you don't feel like it. Now let's make this real. Someone decides to start creating content. They're excited. They post every day for a week. Then nothing happens. No views, no engagement, no results. So they stop. Another person does the same thing, but they expect slow growth. They commit to a schedule. 3 times a week, no matter what. They don't wait for results. They focus on consistency. Weeks pass, then months, and slowly, things start to build. That's the difference. Not talent, not luck, time in the system. Now here's something important. Consistency is not about doing more. It's about doing less, repeatedly, because most people try to do too much. They overload themselves. Too many ideas, too many tasks, too many expectations, and eventually, they burn out. So they stop completely. Now let's shift that. Simple shift. Lower the barrier. Instead of asking, how can I do more? Ask, what can I do consistently? Even on your worst day, even when you're tired, even when you don't feel like it, because that's what matters, not your best days, your consistent ones. Now another step, create a simple rule, something clear, something repeatable. For example, I will work on my system for 1 hour a day, or I will post 3 times a week, or I will improve one part of my system every day. Simple, clear, repeatable, because clarity removes decision fatigue, and decision fatigue kills consistency. Now here's the deeper truth. You don't need to feel motivated. You need to become reliable. Reliable with your actions. Reliable with your time. Reliable with your commitment. Because once you become reliable, your system starts to grow, even when you don't feel like it. Now pause for a moment. Think about something you started, but didn't continue. Be honest. Was it really that it didn't work, or that you didn't stay consistent long enough? Because that answer reveals everything. Now here's the truth. Consistency is not exciting. It's repetitive, it's quiet, it's sometimes boring, but it's powerful. Because over time, it compounds, and what feels small today becomes significant later. That's how systems grow. Not fast, but steadily. Now, if this chapter made something clear, if you're starting to realize that inconsistency, not lack of ability, has been holding you back, stay with this, because this is where things start to change permanently. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is where you build something that actually lasts. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. What's one thing you know you need to stay consistent with? Because that awareness is where your growth begins. Now we go deeper, because even with consistency, there's one final shift that determines everything. your identity. Chapter 10. You don't need more time. You need a new identity. This is the final shift. Not strategy, not tools, not even systems, identity. Because at the end of everything you've learned, this is what determines whether you actually follow through or go back to how things were. You can understand everything. You can agree with everything. You can even start. But if your identity doesn't change, you will return to your old patterns every time. You've seen this happen. People start something new. They're focused, disciplined, consistent for a while. Then slowly, they go back to old habits, back to old thinking, back to old results. And it feels like, I just can't stay consistent. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is this. They're trying to act differently without becoming different. Now let's go deeper. Right now you have an identity, whether you've defined it or not. And that identity sounds like this. I'm someone who works for money. I'm someone who needs a job. I'm someone who tries but struggles. I'm someone who doesn't fully have control yet. And every decision you make aligns with that, even if you don't realize it. Now here's the shift. If you want a different outcome, you need a different identity. Not someday. Now. Because identity doesn't follow results. Results follow identity. That's the part most people miss. Now let's make this real. If you still see yourself as a worker, you will always default to waiting for instructions, trading time, looking for stability, avoiding risk, even if you're trying to build something. But if you start seeing yourself as a builder, everything changes. You start creating opportunities, thinking in systems, taking ownership, acting with intention. Same person, different identity, different results. Now here's where it gets powerful. You don't need permission to change your identity. You decide it through your actions, through your standards, through your consistency, every day. Now let's break this down. A worker thinks, what do I need to do today? A builder thinks, what am I building today? A worker asks, how do I get paid? A builder asks, how does this keep paying? A worker waits. A builder creates. That's the shift. Not big, but powerful. Now here's something important. You don't switch identity overnight, you reinforce it daily, through small actions, repeated, consistently, because identity is not what you say once, it's what you prove repeatedly. Now let's make this practical. Simple shift. Act like the Buddha vision of you. Before you make a decision, ask, what would someone building a system do right now? Not what feels easy, not what you usually do, but what aligns with where you're going. Because that question interrupts your old identity and replaces it with a new one. Now another step, set a minimum standard, something non-negotiable. For example, I work on my system every day, even if it's small, even if it's imperfect, because consistency builds identity. Now here's the deeper truth. You don't become a builder when your system works. Your system works because you became a builder. That's the order. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, am I still thinking like a worker or starting to think like a builder? Because that answer determines everything, not your ideas, not your effort, your identity. Now here's the truth. You don't need more time. You don't need more information. You don't need more motivation. You need alignment between who you are and what you're trying to build, because once that aligns, everything becomes easier, not effortless, but clearer, more consistent, more real. And that's when things change. Not suddenly, but permanently. Now, if this chapter made something click, if you're starting to see that your biggest limitation was not your situation, but your identity, stay with this, because this is where everything locks in. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next audiobook will take you deeper into building your first real income system, step by step, from idea to execution. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. What identity do you feel like you've been operating from? Worker or builder? Because that awareness is where your transformation begins. Now we move to the final chapter, where everything comes together and we set the direction for what happens next. Chapter 11. You don't escape, you transition. Let's finish this the right way. Not with motivation, not with hype, but with clarity. Because if you stayed this far, you already know something most people don't. You don't escape the system by running from it. You transition out of it, strategically, step by step, and that changes everything. Because now you're not desperate, you're deliberate, you're not guessing, you're building, you're not reacting, you're in control. Now let's bring this all together. You started with this feeling. I am stuck, working, trying, but not moving forward. And now you understand why. It wasn't just your job. It wasn't just your income. It was the system, trading time, depending on one source, not building anything beyond it. And once you saw that, everything started to shift. You realized you don't need to quit immediately. You need to build first. You don't need more effort. You need leverage. You don't need random side hustles. You need a system. You don't need more time. You need a new identity. That's the transformation, not external, internal. Because once your thinking changed, your direction changed. Now here's the truth. Nothing changes from this unless you act on it. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Even if it's small, even if it's imperfect, because progress doesn't come from big moves. It comes from consistent ones. Now let's make this real. From today, you don't need to do everything. You just need to do one thing. Choose your system and start building it. That's it. Not 5 systems, not 10 ideas. One, because that one decision is what separates people who stay stuck from people who move forward. Now here's something important. You will not feel ready. You will not feel certain. You will not feel confident at the beginning, and that's normal. Because clarity comes from action, not thinking. So you start anyway. You build anyway. You learn anyway. And over time, things become clearer, stronger, more real. Now pause for a moment. Imagine your life. If you keep going the way you are now, same routine, same system, same results. A year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Be honest, because that picture is your default future. And if you don't like it, then you already know what needs to happen. You build something different. Now imagine another path. You start small. You stay consistent. You build one system. It grows slowly, then more, until one day your income is not coming from just one place. You have options, flexibility, control. That's not a dream. That's a process. And now you understand it. Now here's the final truth. You don't escape by quitting. You escape by building. And once you build something that works, even a little, everything changes. Your confidence, your decisions, your future. Now, if this audiobook shifted something for you, if you're starting to see things differently, don't let this just be something you listen to. Let it be something you act on. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next audiobook is where this becomes real. Not just thinking. Execution, step by step, from idea to your first working income system. No guessing, no confusion, just clarity. And if this hit you, share it in the comments. What system are you going to start building? Because that decision is where everything begins. And if you know someone who feels stuck, working but not moving forward, send this to them, because sometimes the only thing someone needs is to see a different way. But before you go, remember this. You're not stuck. You've just been following a system that was never designed to free you, and now you're not. But here's the part most people never reach. Starting is easy. Building something that actually works is where everything breaks. Because once you begin, new problems show up. What should you build first? How do you know if your idea will work? How do you get your first customer? How do you make your first real income without guessing? And this is where most people stop. Not because they can't, but because they don't know how. That's exactly what we're solving next. Because in the next audiobook, I'm going to walk you through how to choose a system that actually works, how to validate your idea before wasting time, how to get your first paying customer, how to build your first real income loop, step by step, no confusion, no overload, no theory, real execution, because thinking differently is only powerful when you start building correctly. So if you're serious about not staying where you are, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next step is where everything becomes real. And once you see it, you won't go back to guessing. This is where your transition begins.